In a quiet corner of Minnesota, tucked between frosted pine trees and silent streets, stood Oak Ridge Elementary, an aging school with cracked tiles, flickering fluorescent lights, and a heartbeat powered not just by teachers and students, but by a janitor named Mr. Harold, stooped with time, his hands calloused from years of labor, and his heart soft in ways even he didn't fully understand. Harold wasn't just a man with a mop, he was the silent guardian of hallways, the fixer of broken chairs, the wiper of tears when no one else saw. And it was during a gray Monday morning, amid the routine scrape of chairs and murmur of math lessons, that he first noticed Jacob, a small, wiry second grader who refused to sit. The classroom, full of laughter and chaos, seemed to blur around this one boy who stood motionless by his desk, not defiant but scared, like a soldier bracing for an unseen war. Harold lingered outside room 204 longer than usual, mop in hand, brow furrowed. Kids could be odd sometimes, yes, but this boy didn't fidget, didn't rebel, he looked frozen in a posture that whispered of pain and fear, not mischief. Over the week, Harold noticed more. Jacob never sat. Not during math, not during story time, not even during lunch, where he stood quietly by the end of the cafeteria table nibbling a crust of bread. He didn't smile, didn't speak, and wore clothes too big for his frail frame, denim jeans with rough stitching and a jacket missing buttons. There was a loneliness about him that echoed in the corners of Harold's chest, pulling loose memories from the depths of his own childhood, a boy left behind, unheard, unseen. One afternoon, while replacing a broken swing in the playground, Harold found a small scrap of jean, frayed and bloodied, tangled in the chain. A shiver passed through him. That same day, Jacob wore pants with a crudely sewn patch, uneven and desperate. The school staff called him difficult, some even chuckled that he was stubborn, but Harold saw something else, suffering disguised as silence. That Friday, as the sun dipped low and buses rumbled off, Harold saw Jacob walking, alone, no backpack, shoes flapping, steps heavy for such a small child. Compelled by something deeper than duty, Harold followed at a distance, past the grocery store, past shuttered windows, until Jacob turned into a forgotten trailer park on the town's edge, where rust crept like ivy and silence hung thicker than snow. The boy disappeared into a rust-colored trailer with a broken door and curtains drawn tight. Harold stood for a long moment before walking straight to the principal's office. It took everything to convince Mrs. Eldridge to make the call to Child Protective Services, but Harold's voice, usually quiet, shook with such conviction that she did. What followed was a weekend heavy with waiting, worry coiling in Harold's stomach like smoke. Monday came. No Jacob. Tuesday too. By Wednesday, word trickled in, CPS had intervened. And what they found would break even the hardest hearts. Jacob had been living with an abusive father, a man whose record had been buried under years of relocations and falsified reports. His mother had disappeared when Jacob was a baby. The boy had grown up in silence and pain, beaten for sitting wrong, for speaking too loudly, for simply being. His back was a map of bruises and healing wounds. The reason he never sat? Because it hurt. The weight of this truth sat heavy on Harold's chest. That night, long after the school emptied, Harold walked into room 204 with a screwdriver and lowered one of the desks until it was nearly on the ground. He brought in a cushioned mat from home and placed it gently in front of the desk. When Jacob returned weeks later, shy, eyes cast downward, clinging to the sleeve of a kind-faced foster mother, he stopped at the classroom door. He saw the lowered desk. The mat. Then Harold, standing in the corner with his mop, who gave him a small, understanding nod. Jacob walked slowly, lowered himself onto the mat, and, for the first time, sat without pain. That moment was the start of something neither of them fully understood. Over the months, Jacob began to change, slowly, like winter melting into spring. He still didn't speak much, but he began to draw. First in the dirt during recess, then on paper Harold quietly slipped into his cubby. He drew houses with big windows, dogs with wagging tails, and once, 2 stick figures holding hands. One tall, one short. Harold kept that one. Ms. Carter, the teacher who once thought Jacob was difficult, cried the first time he spoke aloud in class, just a single word, "Thank you." Every day, Harold made sure Jacob's mat was in place, his pencils sharpened, his space safe. He brought extra snacks, sometimes mittens when snow began to fall. No one asked him to. No one told him he had to. But Harold remembered what it was like to feel forgotten. He had once lived in the shadows of adults who didn't care, in a house where silence was survival. And maybe, just maybe, helping Jacob was like healing that long-aching boy inside himself. That spring, during the annual class story contest, while others wrote wild tales about superheroes and monsters, Jacob submitted a single page with a drawing and the words, "My best friend is Mr. Harold. He sees me." Ms. Carter framed it. The principal read it at assembly. Harold cried quietly behind the gym curtain. As the years passed, Harold and Jacob's bond deepened. When Harold finally retired, the school honored him with a surprise celebration. They gave speeches, handed him a plaque, and the entire cafeteria clapped until their hands hurt. But the only thing Harold truly cared about was Jacob, now in 4th grade, standing proud in a pressed shirt and shiny shoes, running up to hug him in front of everyone. They continued to meet. Saturdays spent building birdhouses, painting old coffee cans into flower pots, or simply sitting in silence on the porch of Jacob's new home, a safe one filled with warmth and books and laughter. Jacob smiled more, laughed sometimes, and once told Harold he wanted to help kids like him when he grew up. Years passed. Jacob became a bright, kind teenager, deeply empathetic, protective of others in a way that only those who have known fear truly are. He volunteered at shelters, helped tutor younger kids, and when it came time for graduation, he stood at the podium as class valedictorian, adjusted the microphone with trembling fingers, and looked out at the crowd until his eyes locked on Harold, sitting in the front row with a proud tear rolling down his weathered cheek. "I am here," Jacob began, voice clear and steady, "because someone looked beyond my silence." He didn't have a title or a degree. He wasn't my teacher. He was my janitor. But he saw me when no one else did. He saw a hurting child and chose kindness over convenience. He chose love. The auditorium fell silent, then erupted in applause that echoed like thunder. After the ceremony, students surrounded Harold, many with tears in their eyes, thanking him for what he did, for who he was. He didn't say much. Just smiled, hugged Jacob, and whispered, "I'm proud of you, son." Today, Jacob is a children's therapist specializing in trauma, working with abused and neglected kids. On his office wall, above a small bookshelf filled with picture books and stuffed animals, hangs a simple framed drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands. One tall, one short. Below it, in Jacob's childlike handwriting, the words still read, "My best friend." He often tells his patients about a man named Mr. Harold, who once made a boy feel safe enough to sit. Because sometimes, kindness isn't loud. It isn't flashy. Sometimes, it's a lowered desk. A soft mat. A silent nod that says, "You matter." And that kind of kindness, the kind that sees through pain and believes in broken hearts, doesn't just change lives. It saves them.